What's the most shocking family secret that finally got spilled and exposed everything? I never realized how much trauma one little story could leave me with. First, I was raised in Amazonia. We lived in the capital, but Dad had a small farmhouse at a community half buried in the woods. The only thing separating the house from the wall of greenery and the creepy noises was a thick chainmail fence. I remember having to wait for Mom to check inside shoes and clothing for scorpions, and if we forgot to close the tarp above the pool overnight, it would be dawn filled with frogs and toads of all shapes and forms. There was this tall, massive poodle dog that resembled a small tank, territorial and fierce. After guarding our piece of land in the jungle for a couple of years, it became a bloodied warrior that would lay waste to one or two snakes every night. Well, it was scary but fun, until this. Once we visited a bunny farm and each of us, me, bro, and sis, got a bunny to raise. We spent the week happily bonding with the new pets. When the weekend arrived and we were let out of classes, the entire family drove out to the farmhouse. Friday to Saturday overnight, 1 out of 3 bunnies went missing. Terribly sad. My sister 6 and I, 8, asked Mom about it. Mom told little sister that the bunny fell in love with a wild forest bunny and ran off to get married. Little sister believed her. I was a little brat and refused to swallow that down, so I pestered Mom the entire day to allow me to venture into the woods, Indiana Jones style, to find that naughty bunny. Of course, the last thing Mom wanted was for 2 girls, 6 and 8 years old, who could easily get lost in the potentially dangerous woods, to wander into it recklessly. After failing for a while to dissuade me, she finally let out a secret that little sister was never meant to hear. In reality, a wolf had dug under the fence and had the bunny. Thank you, Mother, for the nightmares. And she didn't want me venturing into the woods to search for it, lest I meet the same unfortunate fate. I barely slept, terrified. From Saturday to Sunday, the other 2 bunnies were also gone. Mom kept up the lie that wolves had devoured them, and I became so scared of the farmhouse that I refused to ever set foot on it again. After a string of ruined weekends filled with tantrums, Dad gave the house to his ex-wife as part of their nuptial agreement, in exchange for something else, and we never saw that place again. Years later, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but we were going through old picture albums as a family. The farmhouse came up, and I decided my sister was old enough to know the truth, so I told her the sad ending of the bunnies. Sister looked just as terrified as I had. That day, Mom briskly pulled me aside and revealed an even harder truth. The one who had accidentally ended the bunnies was actually my little brother. He was 4 at the time and had been playing with the bunnies without his sister or me to supervise him. He grabbed one and it tragically didn't survive. Seeing the unmoving bunny, he ran crying to Mom, who fabricated the elope story to soothe little bro's conscience, insisting he hadn't harmed the poor thing. "Oh, he's asleep. Tomorrow you can play some more," she said, then quickly buried the bunny during the night and pretended it had eloped with a wild companion. Bro went on to play with the other 2 bunnies and the same thing happened. Just how was he playing with the poor things? Mom kept up the story for my younger siblings while I carried the grisly truth. She deliberately scared me to prevent me from being reckless and risking poisonous or venomous encounters if I charged into the woods. But instead, I developed a deep-rooted fear and an OCD-like need for cleanliness, driven by paranoia that everything in nature was out to get me. For years, I refused to step into any kind of natural setting. When I finally learned the real truth, that my little brother had accidentally ended the bunnies, instead of feeling relief, I was met with another layer of trauma. Even 20 years later, I still refuse to let him near my pets. Story 2. My stepdad had a secret daughter and nearly faced criminal charges because of it. When he was in his late 20s, he started dating a woman in his apartment complex. After a few months, she cut off all contact. It turned out she was pregnant, but was already married and never told him. Her husband must have been a special kind of unaware, because she hid the pregnancy from him, claiming she had stomach cancer. When she gave birth, she left the baby in a dumpster, but a hospital janitor found her just in time. The woman came forward a few days later. My stepdad had no idea about the pregnancy at all, and hadn't heard from her for almost a year. As soon as he saw the baby, it was undeniable that it was his, and he did everything he could to claim custody, while having to go through a rigorous process to prove his innocence. He also had to complete months of parenting classes and demonstrate that he deserved to keep the child. Meanwhile, the story made national headlines, and adoption offers poured in. But he is absolutely a family-is-family person and was determined to get custody of his child from the state, while the mother was now very much in jail. After a long process, he finally had custody of his daughter. However, he was in his late 20s, working a demanding on-call job, and his first wife had just abandoned their toddler son at the demands of her new husband. He was living in a rundown apartment, working 65 hours a week, usually overnight shifts, and was now alone, taking care of 2 children under the age of 3. Within a year or so, he finally caved and gave his daughter up for adoption. The adoptive family was very wealthy, lived in a great area, and was unable to have a child of their own. He even tried to negotiate being a part of her life, but the family felt it would be best to raise her as their own. It crushed him, but he agreed, and under the stipulation that she would be told the truth when she reached adulthood, he promised not to contact her. Within a few weeks of her 18th birthday, she located my stepdad. By that time, he and my mom were happily married, and my mom had known about this from the beginning. He and my mom had moved out of state when I was 20, and it took a couple of years before I could visit. When my mom was in town and we were planning my first visit, she casually told me, "By the way, this is a thing that happened, and your stepsister will be down here as well." She and her adoptive mother, after the adoptive father passed away shortly before her 18th birthday, are now very much part of the family. His son had a rough life and unfortunately died of a drug overdose on his 25th birthday, just a few months after meeting her. I went back and read all the articles I could find about the story. The quotes in those articles are so purely him. Also, purely his is the fact that he has spent the last 25 years still turning down offers to appear on shows like Oprah or Ellen, along with numerous paid book deals. All he ever wanted from the whole situation was to provide the best life possible for his daughter, even if that meant giving her up. She now does a lot of work with Safe Haven. She's a typical mid-20s girl who seems to enjoy the attention she's received from her work. I believe she actually accepted a book deal, much to his chagrin, but at the end of the day, the work she's doing is a net positive, and he happily supports her endeavors. He is one of the most loyal, honorable people you could ever meet. For him, it's never unclear what the right thing to do is. Life has thrown him a lot of challenges, yet he consistently acts with integrity. Growing up, I always liked him, but it's uneasy to really accept a stepdad as part of your parental unit, especially when they enter your life as a nearly adult. Learning how he handled this situation earned immense respect and admiration from me. It made me realize that all the kind things he did for me had nothing to do with the uneasiness of being a step-parent or pleasing my mom. He did them because he instinctively knows what is right, acts on it, and takes his greatest pleasure in helping and making others happy. My biological dad is no slouch either, and is very much a part of me, but even though my stepdad never felt the need to teach it or explain it, I learned the joy of selflessness and the value of true morals, not the kind you have to twist your mind around to justify simply by watching him. God, what a good friggin' guy he is. I really should call him tomorrow. Story 3. My mother had 6 kids with 4 different dads. Growing up, we were told it was only 3 dads, 3 older brothers from the first guy, me from my dad, and then 2 younger brothers from the third guy. It all started when I asked my mom, years after my parents divorced, to tell me how she met my dad. She said, "He was an officer, and your oldest brother had wandered too far from the house, so he brought him home in a police car. They got to talking, and eventually he met her off-duty and asked her out. They dated for a while before he asked her to marry him." I asked, "What's a while?" She said, "Oh, about a year and a half," and I didn't think twice at the time. I knew I was in my mom's womb at the wedding, but dear God, I hope I can explain this clearly. My 2 oldest brothers, 39 and 38, look almost identical, but my next oldest brother, 33, doesn't. I later found out the third brother was from guy number 2, and that guy number 1 was distantly related to my mom, something she wasn't told by my grandma until after the second brother was born. Apparently, my grandma knew guy number 1 was a cousin and didn't mention it. Mom wanted more kids but didn't want them with guy number 1, so she met guy number 2. She told him she was pregnant with the third brother, but he didn't want a baby and left. Then my dad met my mom shortly after she knew she was pregnant with the third brother, but she didn't tell him, "Hey, I'm a few weeks pregnant." The guy literally just left. As she started showing, my dad was thrilled. He thought the child was his. Mom later told me she considered letting him think the baby was his, but she couldn't go through with it. She ended up telling him, and my dad broke up with her because why not just say it from the start? At this point, she decided 3 kids on her own was not what she wanted, so she started working toward giving the baby up for adoption after birth. I guess my dad just needed time to process, because my mom and dad still talked through her pregnancy, and she told him, "I'm adopting the baby once he's born." My mom gave birth to the third brother in July 1987, and my parents were married in October 1987. I was born in June 1988. The third brother was adopted by a family in Alaska, and it was an open adoption. I knew him growing up and thought it was normal for people to have brothers being raised somewhere else until I was school age. Here's the crappy part. My dad offered to raise all 3 older brothers as his own, but his mom, my lovely Unchi, whom I adored, told him that he and my mom needed a fresh start and said, "Your mom has already started the adoption process. Just let her do this, then marry her and have a child of your own." My older brother, 33, and I are 11 months and 7 days apart, and I believed everything my mom told me until later, trying to piece it all together. My two oldest brothers, 38 and 39, were given my last name, and my dad adopted and raised them. I'm sorry, but that's not all. I swear I'm almost done. Now, my parents stayed together until I was about 4.5 years old, and then they divorced, finalized in December 1992. My younger brother was born in December 1993, so within about 3 months after the divorce, my mom was pregnant and married guy number 3 in February 1995, staying with him until he died in 2014. My last brother was born in January 1996. The third brother and the fifth brother look exactly alike, while my fourth brother looks nothing like the rest of us. I later found out the last brother was guy number 2's kid, after my aunt said, "Oh yeah, guy number 2 came back all right after your mom was married and had a big fight with your stepdad." Story 4. I cannot speak for every donor-conceived person, but for many of us born in the 90s and beyond, the truth was never told. There's a support group on Facebook, and new members join weekly, dozens, even dozens, every month. Many of them were never told. This hidden truth is traumatic grief, because it is not just the sorrow of losing a genetic connection with a parent who was never really there, but the shock of discovering it later in life, when you had no idea. In the 90s and earlier, gamete donation was completely anonymous. Many donor-conceived people are told, "It doesn't matter. He donated anonymously for a reason. He doesn't want to know you." That is hurtful. I do not believe anyone should donate gametes if they have no intention of ever knowing their biological child. Yet, at the time, donors did so under the promise of anonymity. My biggest frustration is that the contract was between the donor, the clinic, and my parents. It never involved me. I never got to consent. I should not be held to that standard. The right to know one's origins is part of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Keeping a donor's identity secret is unethical. Even if a child grows up knowing they are donor-conceived, they may never meet or know their genetic parent. Many people focus on parents rather than the child. Questions like, "How does your dad feel about you searching for the donor? Aren't you upsetting your parents?" put an enormous burden on the child. Donor-conceived people are expected to prioritize everyone else's feelings over their own. Genetics matter. A child raised by both biological parents cannot decide for someone else that DNA is unimportant. Parents should address their own feelings around infertility before bringing a child into the world, rather than projecting shame and insecurity onto the child. My parents never told anyone, and it was hard not to feel like they were ashamed of me. And then there's the missing medical history. This past year, I was struggling with a severe digestive issue. When my gastroenterologist asked in July if there was any family history, I said no, completely unaware. By December, I discovered I was donor-conceived and met my half-sister. That's when it hit me. We share many of the same health concerns. For some donor-conceived people, meeting their biological parent later in life reveals dangerous hereditary conditions they might be susceptible to. Some discover the BRCA gene, and suddenly, cancer cells could already be forming. The clinic my parents went to was the only option in a sprawling metropolitan area. The fertility doctor performed only a verbal health check and nothing more. Today, clinics are more diligent, but many conditions only appear later in life. If a donor conceives in their early or mid-20s and develops a serious condition in their 30s, there's no requirement for them to report it to the clinic. Sure, some may share voluntarily, but it is never guaranteed. This is why I and so many others believe in two principles. 1. Known donors only, and 2. Telling children from birth. Yes, there's the open at 18 option, but that mainly reassures parents. It lets them feel their child might someday make contact. Until then, the donor remains anonymous. Even after 18, the donor might refuse to communicate or offer nothing. Known donors guarantee that a child will never wonder about traits, ancestry, health history, or whether they have siblings out there. Second, children should know from birth. Today, most parents using donor gametes are either same-gender couples or single parents, so secrecy is largely unnecessary. Regardless of whether parents are same gender or different genders, the child should understand their origin from the start. It helps them grasp where they come from, removes shame, and destigmatizes infertility. There is truly no downside. Right now, knowing my parents hid the truth for so long consumes me daily. The month before my sister found our biological father, I was distraught. I kept imagining the man who shares 50% of my DNA. Would he be cruel? Would he reject me? Would his partner refuse him contact? I am lucky to at least know who he is and have some of his health history. He and my sister have talked, and he reached out to me, but I haven't heard back from him in over a month. It makes me feel like a child again, helpless, at the mercy of the adults. If you want to understand what donor-conceived people think about their origins, this survey is illuminating. Many of us believe the system is broken and needs reform. Our voices, the very children this industry exists to create, are too often dismissed, while parents' feelings are prioritized. Ignoring our experiences is baffling and dismissive. It breaks my heart and mind when people say it's selfish to want to know what I'm biologically made of. My usual response: imagine you are a parent. You give birth, take your child home, love them, raise them, and 10 years later, you discover your child was switched at birth and is not biologically yours. Wouldn't you search for them? Loving the child you raised doesn't vanish, but wouldn't you want to know the truth? Now flip it. I can love my parents and still want to know my biological father. That said, many of us still feel betrayed by our parents for keeping this secret. Relationships are strained, and this is an emotionally complex situation. I know it could be worse, but the lack of societal understanding and support makes it even harder. Story 5. When I turned 18, my uncle, my father's brother, told my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, that we had an older half-sister. My father, who had left on my 6th birthday and never came back, had a child with a woman before he met my mother. Unsurprisingly, my mother had no idea either. It took me a while to tell her. Can't recall exactly how long, maybe a couple of years. She took it well, almost unsurprised. I think she knew my father far better than we ever did. His character, or rather the lack of one. Years later, my younger sister, who is 4 years younger than me, had been corresponding with our half-sister while my brother and I had no contact whatsoever. My sister informed me that this mysterious half-sister, whom I'll refer to as MHS, wanted to attempt some form of communication with my brother and me. I only say attempt because when I called the number my sister provided to try and speak with this long-lost sibling, someone I was excited to meet, she didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Weeks passed, and still no response. Not even a text. She had initiated contact through my sister, yet she didn't even care to answer the phone. Red flag 1. I honestly can't recall exactly what my sister said MHS's request was. It's been around 10 years since then. I think she wanted to correspond via email before considering a phone conversation, yet she had no issue speaking on the phone with my full-blood sister. Red flag 2. By this point, I didn't care enough to entertain MHS's conditions. She'd had over 30 years to reach out and hadn't made an effort. I was genuinely disappointed because I had always felt there was a sibling out there I had never met, and as it turned out, I was right. Apparently, this woman, so unimportant to me that I can't even remember her name, has a family now with a couple of kids. Nephews and nieces I'll probably never meet, unfortunately for all of us. A brother-in-law too, or something along those lines, whom I very honestly have zero interest in meeting. In-laws. What really bums me out is that she made only a half-hearted attempt at correspondence and then gave up simply because she didn't want to speak on the phone. Is that petty or what? Maybe I'm being petty myself since I didn't want to email her after my voicemail was essentially ignored and disregarded. But honestly, wouldn't most people feel a little rejected if they were in the same situation? Or heck, maybe she really is just that shy, which is extremely hard to believe because shyness definitely does not run in our family. Oops, I forgot a pretty pertinent piece of information. My brother and I haven't spoken to our full-blood sister in years, probably around 10 years for me. Not sure how long for him. I've messaged her here and there and she's responded occasionally, but we just don't have jack in common. Live extremely far from one another and lead completely separate lives. I've had my share of struggles, an affinity for drugs over the years, an extremely bad alcohol problem, but nearly 2 years sober now, and yet I was always protective and caring toward my sister growing up. My brother, on the other hand, who still struggles with alcoholism, treated her terribly back then. So I can't really see a reason why she would almost completely cut me out of her life. Him? I don't blame her. It's been a year since my brother and I even spoke either. Damn egos, I tell ya. This woman, my sister, didn't even invite our mother to her wedding, let alone her only brothers. Talk about holding a grudge. I swear I haven't left anything out regarding why she might feel compelled to essentially disown us. Here's where I'm getting with all this sister background info. The only thing I can guess is that my sister might have told our half-sister a bunch of unnecessary nonsense, which could have influenced how she viewed my brother and me, 2 siblings she had never met and still hasn't met or even heard our voices. Damn, that's actually pretty sad when I step back and reflect on it while writing this. I mean, I knew we had a very dysfunctional family, but wow, if there were a contest, we'd almost certainly win some kind of award for ridiculousness. I've considered asking for my half-sister's email countless times, but I know deep down that if she truly wanted to know me for herself, rather than relying on the lovely picture my stuck-up sister has painted, she would have made the effort long ago. Personally, I'd like to find out for myself about a long-lost family member, independent of any second-hand impressions. I can make those assumptions/decision on my own. Who knows? We could have tons in common and get along wonderfully, but I have a feeling we'll never know. Sad ending. Please feel free to let me know what you'd do if you were in my shoes. Comments are more than welcome. Create a wonderful day. Oh, and I just remembered, I have to add this. Years after the original information surfaced about my father's antics, I discovered even more. My promiscuous father started another family after leaving my mother on my 6th birthday. That was actually the last time any of us saw him. Sure, they split long before that, but whatever, right? So apparently, I now have even more younger half-siblings running around somewhere in the Midwest. Who knows if they even have any inkling about his past promiscuity, or if my brother, sister, half-sister, or I even exist to them. Not that it would really matter, once again. Too bad talk shows like Geraldo aren't big anymore because, seriously, I could totally see a 2 or maybe even 3-part special on all of this aforementioned ridiculousness. Story 6. Some people may not mix genders, but you are not alone in your experiences. A boy was harmed by a family member. Years later, my older sister shared a story that mirrored mine. She had experienced similar abuse before me, but didn't feel safe speaking up until her 30s. I spoke out immediately, around 10 or 11. When I told my mom, she didn't fully believe me. She had me explain what happened, and then insisted I must have been mistaken, mostly because I had managed to get away before anything worse could happen. She even spoke to him to hear his side, and he twisted the story to seem harmless. 10-year-old me couldn't argue effectively. I was forced to apologize and told I was causing trouble for the family by speaking up. Over time, I began to rationalize what happened, which affected my relationship with my mom. Years later, my sister shared her story, showing the long-term emotional impact abuse can have. The incredible part, I happened to be at my mom's house the day my sister spoke up. I remember her saying there was no way it could have happened, but also acknowledging she had to believe her daughter. She faced a difficult choice: believe her child and risk conflict, or believe him and risk losing trust with her daughter and the rest of the family. Mom chose to believe my sister. She became a strong support for her healing, giving her the guidance I had needed as a child, and in doing so, she regained my trust too. To this day, I don't think my mom remembers me coming forward. I didn't have the words to fully explain what happened, and she dismissed it as a misunderstanding. For years, I barely remembered it clearly. I haven't brought it up again, partly to protect her, partly to support my sister, and partly because her support for my sister helped complete the pieces of my own healing. Even though I stayed silent, I've seen my mom lose connections with family over the years. They reacted similarly to how she once reacted to me, demanding proof that could never exist. When my sister told me her story, I supported her, but my response wasn't as strong as it should have been. My instinct was to forgive the family that doubted her, trying to maintain ties with people essentially calling her a liar. I had learned that response from watching my mom. I know sharing my own trauma could strengthen my sister's story for others, but it would also hurt my mom and burden my sister unnecessarily. Neither my sister nor I was alone during the abuse. I was with my uncle and his son on the way to baseball practice, and my sister was harmed along with another of his children. He has 5 children, and it's likely they were all affected in some way. Story 7. My father died when I was 7 years old, after a super bitter and contentious divorce from my mother. We never went to his funeral. To this day, I'm 36, and I've never even visited my father's grave, but that's something I hope to fix soon. My siblings and I were told by my mother that we were abused and unwanted by our dad and his new wife, so just before he died, he supposedly sent us away so he could enjoy his life without us, with his new wife and their infant son, my stepbrother. I bitterly hated my father for decades for doing this to us, cruelly sending us away to be impoverished and abused by my mother. My mom told us stories about how he would leave us outside during the winter if we did anything wrong, only fed us a small can of beans or a hot dog for all 3 of us kids, while giving his other son all the best food, toys, and privileges. I couldn't remember anything, so I took her word for it. Ironically, in hindsight, she would talk about how abusive he was, yet she herself would leave us alone for months while vacationing with friends, beat us with tree branches and pipes, or tell us we were her biggest regret in life. Thank God for my older sister. Without her, I'd probably be dead right now. Anyway, 5 years ago, I was getting married and wanted to bury the hatchet with my little brother. I found him on Facebook and started talking with him, and we all reconciled. None of it was his fault after all. He was only a baby. When he flew out to see us, we started talking about our abusive jerk of a father, and he was sincerely confused. As it turns out, after the divorce, my mother, for lack of a better term, seduced a very expensive lawyer into suing my father for custody of us, essentially legally kidnapping us through the system. My father was a very poor Southern man and couldn't afford any high-powered attorneys. We found out that not only was everything we knew about our father a lie, but he had fought tooth and nail until the day he died to get us back, or at least to see us again. We didn't attend his funeral because, of course, our mother didn't want us there. My paternal grandparents and my stepmother, a very kind and wonderful woman, tried to get us kids to attend it, but my mother wouldn't let us. She told us that my dad said in his will that he didn't want us there, which is absurd in hindsight. He died suddenly of a heart attack and had no time to write a will banning his kids from his funeral. Anyway, we discovered my dad had tried to send us mail, gifts, and voicemails, but none of them ever reached us because my mother intercepted and destroyed them all. My dad loved and missed us intensely, up until the moment he died. My stepmom kept court documents, photos, letters, home movies, all proof of his devotion to us, in the hopes that one day we could reconcile. Sometimes I think about it, what must have been going through his head when he was dying? Did he think about us? Did he see me specifically? Did he feel like he failed by not getting us back, and now he'd never see us grow up? Did he die so young from a heart attack because of the stress my mom put him through by taking us away? If he knew the horrible things we thought about him, he would have been crushed. I spent so much time being manipulated into hating my father that I don't even really miss him. It feels good to know my dad loved me, but it doesn't change anything now. I can't call him when I need advice. I can't talk to him about marriage problems or repairing my car. It's the same as it's ever been. I'm just numb to it, and that's the saddest part. I don't know if there's a heaven or an afterlife, but I hope somehow he knows I'm sorry for thinking that way about him, and that I would give anything to be able to talk to him a little or feel what his hug is like. Story 8. Not long ago, a subtle yet explosive family secret came to light, and I've been holding it in ever since. For context, back in the 1960s, my dad married his first wife, had 3 kids, and adopted 2 more. A very classic U.S. nuclear family. Then he went to Vietnam, serving in the army for about 20 years. They divorced in the early 1980s. My mom and dad met sometime after that and eloped in the late 1980s. My favorite photo ever is the only one from their elopement, which was on a boat off the coast of Mexico, if I remember correctly. This caused a huge family fight on my mom's side because her Irish Catholic parents were horrified that their 19-year-old daughter had eloped with a war veteran more than twice her age, who already had 5 kids and an ex-wife. It also caused a huge fight on my dad's side because my mom was the same age as one of his daughters, and they were already not thrilled about their parents' divorce. Eventually, everyone got over it. There's a lot of love in my family, which I always want to stress because on paper, my dad could sound kind of Don Draper-ish and patriarchal. My maternal grandparents eventually came around, and my dad's kids forgave him, probably because he was a genuine gentle giant. He was 6'4", warm, kind, with a booming voice, loved to eat anything, could fall asleep anywhere, and adored all his kids. He and my mom had a happy marriage, and had me and my 5 siblings. He died in 2005 of cancer. Jump to 2020. My brother and I were at my mom's for Mother's Day. My other siblings weren't there due to COVID restrictions. My brother had recently gotten obsessed with learning more about our dad since he died when we were young and never talked about his army life, so he was digging through documents. And boy did he learn a lot. Amid birth and death certificates, photos, and old craps, my brother found an envelope addressed to our dad from around 2007. It was from a private investigator who had been searching for him for over a decade on behalf of a young Vietnamese woman. She had spent most of her adult life looking for her father, an American soldier who dated and unknowingly impregnated her mother during the Vietnam War. Her mother had lost contact with my dad after he left Vietnam and didn't even know she was pregnant until after he was gone. After questioning my mom, we learned the piping hot truth. My dad and his first wife were quietly separated for much of their marriage, and he was dating this Vietnamese woman while deployed. Their daughter only had his name, some army info, and a photo to go off when she hired a private investigator to find him as an adult. This letter from the PI got to my mom about 2 years after my dad died. My mom told his ex-wife, who asked her not to tell any of us, worried about how her kids would react. This was before ancestry websites, so nothing could be proven yet. She felt guilty for not responding at the time, but she was a single mom with 6 kids and still grieving. I don't blame her. She encouraged my brother to respond when he found the letter last May. Long story short, I have a half-sister I didn't know about. DNA results officially confirmed it a few weeks ago. She lives in a different part of the US, but she, her husband, and their dog road trip to meet us. They're extremely lovely, and I really wish she could have met our dad. They would have adored each other. My mom says she and I both have our dad's chin. Story 9. My granddad passed away 14 years ago when I was 18. He was the best dad and granddad anyone could ask for. Back in the 1960s, he looked after my mom on his own for a while after my uncle died of SIDS, which caused my nan to have a breakdown and be admitted to a hospital for a bit. He was well known around the country as a coach driver, taking people on holidays and treating his grandchildren to little mystery trips. He was just a genuinely amazing man. A few years back, my nan mentioned to my auntie that some people had come to the door looking for my granddad. They had a lady with them, in her late 40s. My nan spoke with them for a bit, told them my granddad had been dead for a long time, and they left. At the time, we weren't sure what to think since my nan was in the early stages of dementia, and we didn't know if she had imagined it. Fast forward to around 4 years ago. My nan had passed away a few months prior. My sister received a message from a lady using her husband's Facebook account saying she needed to speak to my mom and asking if my sister could have her contact my mom. My mom got in touch with the woman who explained that she had found my family after seeing my nan's obituary, which listed my mom and auntie's names. The woman had looked my mom up in the records, then tracked down my sister on Facebook. She claimed that my granddad was her father. Back in the early 1970s, he had been seeing her mother when her mother worked in a shop where my granddad used to deliver. My mom confirmed this, remembering that he did deliver there back then. My auntie wanted nothing to do with it, but my mom agreed to meet the woman. It turned out she actually lived in our city, which was strange since neither we nor she were originally from here. She also worked in a shop in the town center. My mom and stepdad met up with her and her husband, and surprisingly, they ended up having a really enjoyable evening. My mom said she knew immediately that it was the truth, as the woman looked exactly like my auntie. Unfortunately, my mom decided she didn't want to see her again, and my auntie still refuses to engage with it, as she idolized my granddad and could not believe he had an affair behind my nan's back. So yes, somewhere in my city, I have an aunt. I have probably passed many times while shopping without ever knowing it. Another family secret I finally revealed only after some time was that my mom's POS second husband, whom I refused to call stepdad, had been physically violent with my sister and me ever since they married. While my mom worked full-time, he was in charge of looking after us. He would make us suffer in ways I still shudder to think about. One day, I reached my breaking point and told my friend's mom. She immediately took me straight to my auntie's house, which was just down the street, and everything escalated from there. My mom finally kicked the POS out and divorced him. While clearing out his belongings, we discovered numerous empty vodka bottles hidden throughout the house/the garden. My nan and granddad realized he had been watering down the alcohol in their liquor cabinet whenever they left him in charge. My mom said we could report him to the police, but it was entirely our choice. In the end, we decided against it, though I regret it to this day, always wondering if he ever did the same to others. Story 10. When I was 16, I finally began to understand where my life began. I remember seeing a framed picture of my mother and father's marriage certificate and doing the math. The math didn't add up. As I got older and started going through puberty, I noticed my mother was extremely strict about me being out unsupervised, being around boys, and staying out after dark. My parents were very strict about my freedom, but my mom especially was. I remember standing in the doorway of my bedroom. My mom was in the hallway that went toward her room. I had just realized that my mom had married my dad in April, but I was born in October. That meant she had been pregnant when she married him. By then, I was already the oldest of 5 kids. I said something to my mom. I don't remember the exact words, but I said out loud, "That's why you hate me so much." The look on her face when she realized that her dark family secret was finally out was a look I had never seen before. She was stunned, speechless, completely unprepared for the moment. Mom had always treated me differently from my siblings. She was really hard on me, rejected me often, and acted as if I deserved nothing. She never told me that she loved me while I was growing up. She also became jealous if other mothers showed me attention, doted on me, or bought me shoes or anything nice, which I desperately needed. Every little ray of light, every small moment of happiness, she would snuff out. I could never understand why she treated me as if I weren't worth anything. I got very good grades, stayed out of trouble, took care of all my siblings, did the cooking and cleaning. I spent years trying to earn the love I never got. Of course, this was not a healthy way to grow up. It led to emotional struggles, eating disorders, and worse. I had no sense of my own worth and didn't know what was healthy or unhealthy. I just knew that any time I spoke up about things that were wrong in our household, I would be punished. They made sure I stayed silent quickly. I remember being 15 as my father and mother were starting the early stages of breaking up. My dad sent me and my sister to my maternal grandmother's house, while my 3 other siblings went to his parents' home just 3 blocks away. I remember feeling as if my higher self understood something terrible was happening, that these events were shaping my future, and that I was about to be deeply affected. It was around this time that my eating disorders began. I felt a deep sadness, as if grieving the child I could have been, the child who could have grown up loved. I was incredibly fortunate, though, to have my grandmother's love. Over the next 4 years, she gave me so much care, attention, and acceptance, treating me as someone she truly wanted. I absorbed her love like a thirsty soul, finally finding water. It didn't instantly fix me. That took therapy and a change of environment when I turned 18. But my grandmother gave me a template for love, That is what I drew from when I had my own children. I can hardly imagine what life would have been like without her intervention. God truly provided a guardian at the 11th hour of my childhood crisis. Later on, I learned more details. My mother, raised by her closed-off, proud 50s housewife grandmother, had gotten pregnant by my dad on a date. She was inexperienced, still very prudish, and claimed to know very little about intimate relations. This happened in the 60s. My dad had taken her to Griffith Park in Los Angeles late at night. She felt overwhelmed as it was non-consensual, and she has carried that resentment for decades, never having therapy, although medications helped some. When she got pregnant, there was an uproar in her family. My grandmother threw her out of the house, completely mortified and embarrassed. My mom was only 18, probably traumatized, and had to go stay with my dad's parents. I am certain his parents were not thrilled either. My grandmother had always struggled with my dad's behavior. According to my aunts, he was so mischievous that my grandmother had to quit her job to stay home, trying to manage his antics. Over the years, my mom developed depression, fibromyalgia, severe PMS, and various mood disorders. She had a reputation for being emotionally immature. She yelled a lot, and my dad often tried to appease her by taking his frustration out on us. Church attendance and craft projects were about the only parenting tools they possessed. Everything else, the day-to-day, fell to me or to nobody at all. Outwardly, we looked like the perfect little family at church, but behind closed doors, life was pure misery. My dad was not at all normal either. I suspect he was born with some neurological difference. He struggled to understand boundaries and caused numerous scandals. He is now on his 5th wife. He caused painful situations within the family, some serious enough to fracture relationships for years involving his stepdaughter and other family matters, which I will not go into. He and his 5th wife are off and on, but as they age, they are trying to make it work simply because it is difficult to be alone in old age. Over time, my parents have calmed down somewhat, realizing some of their mistakes, more so my mom than my dad. Ironically, a best-selling teen novel was inspired by the trauma my brother experienced because of our father. My brother carries a lot of deep trauma, but he is brilliant, loving, and an incredible father. He is finally sober, but the damage is done. His children, like many children of alcoholics, face challenges because of that legacy. Ultimately, what I learned from all this is this: we can point fingers at the bad guy endlessly, but the truth is we are all human. What matters is not blaming others, but breaking the cycle, healing and restoration. There will always be someone affected by dysfunctional families, but our job is to learn, grow, and make ourselves better. Healing, not anger, is the path forward. Story 11. When I was 28, I found out that my dad was not my biological father. The truth came out in a way I never expected. My dad was battling depression and feeling like he might harm himself. So I flew home immediately to take care of him and try to protect him from my mom's constant anger. My mom had verbally and emotionally hurt him throughout their entire relationship. He loved her deeply, and despite the pain, he tolerated it. During a quiet walk with my dad, while I tried to help him through his struggles, he opened up to me. He told me that he was not my biological father. He said he had known this all along, but my mom had lied to him and tried to convince him otherwise. Even though he knew the truth, he decided to play the role of a father anyway. When I was 10 years old, my mom finally confessed to my dad that he was not my biological father. He was deeply worried that hearing the truth officially might somehow change how he felt about me. He feared that this revelation could affect our bond. Years later, when I was 28, during a quiet, emotional walk with my dad, he opened up and shared this story with me. As he poured out his heart, he told me that there were 2 things in life he was most proud of. First, how I had turned out and how he had raised me. Second, when my mom told him that day all those years ago about him not being my biological father, he managed to completely forget about it soon after. He said that later that same night, when he tucked me into bed, the thought crossed his mind for only a brief moment. Then he realized something powerful. Nothing would ever come between us. From that point on, he knew that our father-son relationship would remain unbreakable and just as strong as ever. He also confided something that broke my heart, that my mom had used hard drugs while pregnant with me. Watching that happen had shattered him. They had been very poor at the time, struggling just to survive. My dad had grown up in a foster home without parents, and my mom came from a large, unstable family. She had 6 siblings, and their parents were not equipped to raise them properly. She dropped out of 9th grade, while all her siblings left school even earlier. Many of them could barely read or write. Now I am in my mid-30s, and tragically, my dad ended his life in mid-March of 2020, just as COVID began to spread. I was out of the country when it happened, but I immediately flew home, a 30-hour trip with only a 30-minute layover, and made it in time for his funeral. Since that day, I've tried to live my life in his honor. Everything I do for him. I could talk endlessly about how amazing he was. After leaving the orphanage at age 18, he moved to Atlanta by himself and taught himself woodworking. he became an incredibly talented craftsman, creating fine furniture for renowned interior designers. His work was often featured in magazines, though he was what people might call a starving artist, and we always struggled to get by. I never felt poor. In fact, I felt lucky. Growing up, I often felt like the most fortunate kid on my street. Most of the other children lived in trailer homes and faced constant chaos in their households. But I was surrounded by love. Both of my parents, despite their flaws and hardships, loved me immensely. I always felt supported and cared for. I consider myself truly blessed to have had my dad in my life. Not a day passes without my thinking about him. I am still learning to heal emotionally, to process the loss, and to honor him by living the kind of life that would make him proud. Hearing others share their own similar stories has given me a sense of connection and comfort. The shared pain, the empathy, and the understanding from strangers have inspired me deeply. It has motivated me to begin working on a short stories book, one that will include pieces of my relationship with him, memories, lessons, and the love that defined us. He may not have been my biological father, but he was and always will be my real dad in every way that matters. Here is excerpt from my eulogy, written on the flight to say goodbye to my dad. His hard work. Throughout my entire childhood, my dad worked every single day in his shop, often for long, grueling hours. He never took a day off, not even on Christmas or his birthday. As a kid, I watched his dedication, and it left a lasting impression on me. Importantly, he didn't seem like he was working for someone else. He was working for himself, pursuing what he loved. Woodworking was his passion, and he threw himself completely into it, dedicating his life to creating perfectly crafted items simply because he wanted to. He had an insatiable drive for perfection and an endless reservoir of dedication. He didn't just make furniture, he made masterpieces. When I was 18 and left home to start college, I wanted to emulate him. I wanted to make something of myself and give it everything I had, just like he did. His work ethic had become part of me. I often slept only 4 to 5 hours many nights in a row, pushing myself hard, but I always thought about how much harder my dad had worked. I would remember him in his shop late at night, the saws spinning, the compressor humming, and huge piles of sawdust under his table saw. He gave everything to provide for our family, and he always succeeded. I spent countless hours in his shop as a kid, admiring his dedication to the craft and his relentless pursuit of perfection. Starting college, I wanted to make him proud, but I also wanted to do everything I could to create opportunities for myself. It wasn't just about me. I hoped that somehow he would share in the rewards. He deserved the world, and I tried to channel his energy and commitment into my own life. Everything I have accomplished is because of him. His creative problem solving. My dad didn't just work hard, he solved problems like no one else. There was no physical item he couldn't figure out. He dedicated his life to designing furniture and crafting solutions for every challenge. His ability to think creatively and find solutions went far beyond anything I've ever witnessed. None of my colleagues at MIT, Harvard, Brown, or other prestigious places I've worked could even come close to his ingenuity. Even as a child, I saw his creative mind at work. When he was 12, he became excited after discovering that some radios could be repaired just by replacing the diodes. Later, when I was a child, he built me an incredible treehouse, complete with its own electricity line. During my teenage years, a massive ice storm hit Georgia, causing 500,000 homes to lose power for nearly a week, including ours. My dad had an old portable black and white TV, and without hesitation, he grabbed his car battery and rigged it so we could watch television for days despite the blackout. Over the years, his vehicles were filled with clever contraptions and ingenious workarounds, often resembling modern-day Flintstones cars. This resourcefulness was his way of life, creative, practical, and unrelenting. His strength and character, his perseverance was unmatched. Throughout his life, he faced tremendous adversity, particularly in the last 10 years, when he endured immense pain. He was, without a doubt, the strongest person I have ever known. In recent years, he suffered from Stevens-Johnson syndrome, a rare, excruciating, and life-threatening skin disorder that covered his entire body. Yet he endured, showing resilience beyond belief. His strength was not only in enduring hardship, but also in displaying bravery. Countless times during my childhood, he stepped forward to save the day in moments of crisis. He was fearless. His courage was complemented by physical strength that seemed almost impossible. Even in his 60s, he could often lift more than I could in my 30s, despite my dedication to weightlifting. The combination of his courage and physical power was both humbling and awe-inspiring. Vulnerability and gentleness. Once I reached adulthood, my dad demonstrated a profound form of strength, the courage to be vulnerable. He openly shared the most challenging moments of his life, confiding in me about the pain he had endured. He asked for help when he needed it and admitted when he felt he wasn't strong enough. We all experience these moments. He allowed himself to cry, showing me that vulnerability is in fact a sign of strength and bravery. Closing. As I conclude, I want to reflect on a stanza from one of my favorite artists, Alanis Morissette, who asks, how about remembering your divinity? How about unabashedly bawling your eyes out? How about not equating death with stopping? To this, I know that my dad will continue to inspire and influence me for the rest of my life. I am who I am because of him. I have always aspired to uphold the principles he lived by, and I hope that others can see his virtues reflected in me. I want to continue his legacy. Death did not stop him, and I challenge all of you to do the same. Never equate death with stopping. We can do more than remember someone. We can continue to learn from them and live the lessons they taught us. Here are the principles he instilled in me. Katra, when you find something you love, whether work or a hobby, give it everything you have. Be creative in solving problems. Take time to appreciate life's so-called minutiae. The small, seemingly trivial details can hold extraordinary meaning. Be willing to play, to be silly, and to never take yourself too seriously. Be brave, be strong enough to allow yourself to be vulnerable. Be both a teacher and a lifelong student. Speak earnestly and mean what you say. Connect with others and form a community. Be there for others, and don't be afraid to rely on support when you need it. I would give anything to have my dad here with us today. In his own words, which he often shared with me, it's not what happens to you, but how you handle it. I urge you all to honor him by staying strong, connecting with your community, and continuing to learn from the lessons he taught. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.